Department of Financial Services, big bank enforcement actions. Our core thesis, we view the ETF or the exchange traded product expanding access to the asset management side is expanding access crypto as an asset. We do a lot on tokenization. That's the future. I know.
What are the most challenges you face within compliance regulation? Hello, Andrew.
Hey, Tarek, good to be here.
It's amazing having you today.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
So let's kick it here. Explain to us how your journey evolved from traditional finance to blockchain to ending up being the head of legal at 21Shares.
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's been a long journey, but a really interesting one. I started my career right out of law school in government. I started as an enforcement attorney at an agency that was very new at the time called the New York State Department of Financial Services. I actually went there instead of going, law firm or other kind of routes. I was convinced that I would get really meaningful experience, which I did, and so I started my career doing big bank enforcement actions, AML, sanctions, market manipulation, high frequency trading abuses, et cetera, over a course of a number of different matters. I also did some insurance enforcement work, consumer protection. So I really got a good perspective into the TradFi financial services industry, particularly banking and banking adjacent type of businesses, money transmitters, you name it. I spent years in government. I then decided I wanted a little bit more experience in the private sector, so I went to private practice at a law firm where I was there for about 7 years, really helping build out their blockchain regulatory practice. I wasn't only doing blockchain work, did a lot of other work, securities work, enforcement work, investigations, lots of regulatory work, AML, sanctions, payments, money transmission. And it was then in 2016 that I really started doing serious blockchain product work. And I really fell in love with it. And so, I've been practicing law for over a dozen years and really doing blockchain product work for almost 8 years now.
Nice. So within 21Shares, how would you explain you guys are trying to bridge between traditional finance and the blockchain? It's not an easy task. It's kind of like a big mission. How would you put it in words?
You know what? You actually stated our mission in your question, which is our core thesis is really two things. I think one is on the ETF side, we view the ETF or the exchange traded product as a really efficient TradFi wrapper for expanding access to the underlying. So our core thesis on the asset management side is expanding access, giving investors a greater, an easier ability to access crypto as an asset class. Nice. We also have a really robust tech business where we do a lot on tokenization. We do a lot on building blockchain infrastructure, and we view both worlds, tech, asset management, as at some point converging into each other. That's the future. I know we'll talk more about that down the line, but our core thesis on the ETF side is expanding access and just making it easier for people who wouldn't even think they're interested in this sector to start to get interested.
Nice. I love that perspective. Given we're talking about ETFs and this is very, very heavy regulated industry, how would you perceive over the last few years, specifically in the US, the regulatory framework is changing, like in a very like brief way, if I would say?
Sure. I think, this is a really tough question.
Yeah, I know.
It's a great one though. The US, I think about the US as the US historically in the securities industry has been actually quite centralized. You have the SEC, you've got, that's the SEC, you've got FINRA, which is, overseen by the SEC. The securities capital markets are very centrally regulated. You have exchanges, national securities exchanges that have their own rules. But for the most part, securities laws in the U.S. are quite centrally, regulated. You've got some state, blue sky regulators that have authority there. Uh, Other areas of the law, very
Yeah.
centrally regulated, banks, etc. The great challenge with crypto in the U.S. is when crypto was first introduced, there was not a unifying and comprehensive legal and regulatory framework that applied across the country. You've got 50 states, you've got the federal government, you've got various money transmitter laws in each of these 50 states. You've got various banking laws. Some states have limited purpose trust companies that are highly regulated, other states don't. So I think you asked me a short answer. The short answer is the US has a real fragmentation when it comes to regulation, and there's a real lack of clarity about what you can and can't do, which I think is as a result of that fragmentation.
Okay, to follow up on this topic, because this is a very interesting topic, specifically within like crypto Twitter. Uh, everybody is saying like US is lagging behind when it comes to the crypto regulation, right? But like for me, I always say we're not lacking talent, we're not lacking technology, we're just lacking passing few bills that, like you said, make things more clear. I don't think US is like falling behind. It's more like once those are in place and founders or like executives, specifically on Wall Street, have more clarity, uh, we will catch up. Even like we will be like the first. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think US still has among the best talent. I think US has the drive and the creativity and the culture as a country to really think outside the box and come up with crazy ideas. I think US has, the financiers, those on the investor side that want to take risks. Not every country, not every geographic region has that in the world. That doesn't mean the U.S. is not facing real challenges. And to your point, the U.S. is behind. That's a fact. We are
Yeah,
way behind Europe. Europe has MiCA coming into effect in January. That is going to be a huge aspect. There's going to be a lot of rollouts, and it might be lack of clarity there. But I think the great challenge of the U.S. is the great challenge is there hasn't really been a political will to
yeah,
solve this problem of crypto
exactly.
regulation. But on the flip side, the US had one of the first crypto regulatory regimes back in 2015, which is the New York State bit license,
Yep.
which if you go look at the bit license and it was actually introduced, I think, a year or two before then. So I believe 2014 was when it was first introduced for public comment. So if you go back and look at the bit license, that was really early days for crypto. Since then, the US really hasn't done anything that I view as really substantive from a crypto regulatory perspective. There's been some guidance, there's been some states that have, adjusted certain things, but nothing as comprehensive as the bit license. So
Yeah,
we were
100%.
early. We were early. We took a bunch of years off, and now we need to catch up.
Because you mentioned bit license, for the people hearing us, like in like one two sentence, what's bit license and why it's important?
Yeah, the bit license is it's the New York State virtual currency licensing framework, and what it does is if you operate in New York or
Yeah,
offer your products to New York residents, then you're required to comply with a number of different areas of the bit license, and the intention of the bit license is to regulate intermediaries. So those include custodians, exchanges, people engaging in services where you take one thing, give it to another person. So it's really meant to cover the guts or the infrastructure of CeFi crypto. I think, I think if you look at the bit license on paper, I think it's a great thing to read. It's not perfect.
mhm.
It probably goes over in some areas and not enough in others, but generally focuses on intermediaries.
Nice, nice. Because we're talking about regulation, you work at 21Shares, you're head of legal. What are the most challenges you face when you were like within compliance regulation? Because you guys operate in capital markets, you pitch like firms that are very heavily regulated. What are your thoughts on that? What's the main challenges you face day to day?
Everything, it's always a challenge. Any company
Yeah,
in the crypto or blockchain space is just you have to assume we're under the microscope. And so I have a really high standard of excellence for compliance at the company. And it's a couple buckets. I think one is culture of compliance, and our founders fully buy in, top down. We have
Nice.
comply, high standard of ethics and integrity at our company. We've got policies, we've got procedures, and I think we do a really good job of, threading that needle between helping the business succeed, but also protecting the company and protecting investors. And so culture is huge. And then I think, I mentioned high standard of excellence. We have, we expect a lot from the people that work at our company. We want, really big, we want big ideas, and we don't sacrifice our moral and ethical high ground just to make a quick buck. And so, I think having a high standard of excellence, culture of compliance, and just really knowing where the risks are. Not everything that we do or any company does presents the same risk. Doing one area of the business might be riskier than another area and might require more attention. So it's just being adaptable and dynamic with those kinds of challenges.